Welcome back to another edition of Music Monday from the podcast Nurture the Mind. I am your host, Cole Poots. Today, though, we're not going to have a music reaction. We're going to switch it up. We're going to do something a little bit different. I've done videos before in the past on the channel where I think it was like in 2020, I did my top 10 favorite albums of 2020, and then I did some honorable mentions, and I believe there's also a video out there on my channel where I talked about the top 3 most influential albums in my life. And so actually last few days being on YouTube, I kind of got inspired once again. You see these videos that'll pop up every once in a while outside of reactions that I watch, people that create lists or like tier lists, and a lot of that happens at the end of the year because these music reaction channels, they're talking about, their top 10 favorite albums of 2024 or their top 10 favorite tracks. And so then last night in particular, I think it was like 2 or 3 videos that I watched of people's opinions, and their opinions, their top 50 favorite songs of all time. Now, I'm not going to get that intricate because I feel like it would be very, very hard to nail down my top 50 favorite songs of all time or my top 50 favorite albums of all time. What I just did for the last hour or so is I tried to go through my entire music library, which I really just went through Apple Music because that's the musical library that I've been pretty much using, ever since I was back in high school and middle school. I've listened to some stuff on Spotify, and then I probably have some things in my music library on Apple Music that I didn't necessarily catch. So I'm hoping that I didn't miss anything when it comes to this list. But basically, my list is 50 great albums, in my opinion, and I set it up in alphabetical order because that was the way that I was going through my music library. So it's not necessarily the top 50 albums of all time, in my opinion, but it's 50 great albums, in my opinion, and they are in alphabetical order. And once we get through the 50, then I have some honorable mentions that we will also go through. Like I said, I don't know how people do this, how they craft these lists, because, chances are, based on however old you are, you've been listening to music for a long time. There's a lot of music that I've listened to that's in my catalog, that's in my library, and I don't know if I could go through everything and try and determine that and nail it down and get it so specific to a top 50 songs, a top 50 albums, whatever it may be. So this is me attempting to make a list, but like I said, it's 50 great albums in my opinion, and it's alphabetical order. So it's not necessarily like we're going to start with 1 and we're going to go to 50. So it doesn't mean 50, in my opinion, is 50th on the list. It's just alphabetical order. I probably over-explained there, but who gives a fuck? Let's get through it. I am excited for this experience. Maybe what I'll do as well is I might give you guys a little bit of a snippet about the album. If it had like a profound impact on me, then I might say a few different things. But otherwise, I'm going to try and keep this short, and I'm going to just try and get through it with ease. So let's start with number 1. We have Long Live ASAP by A$AP Rocky. So let's see, that album I think came out in 2013. So I was a sophomore in high school, and I was driving around town here in Indianola, Iowa, and I was driving my first car, 2006 Honda Civic. It was a beautiful blue color, and I had black rims that I got for my 16th birthday, and also had blacked out windows. So I thought I was hot shit. And I remember bumping this album. I remember driving around and also at the time driving my friends back and forth, even though this album came out in January of 2013. I didn't turn 16 until March 21st of 2013. So technically, I was not supposed to be driving with my friends in the car, but I did anyways. I remember in specific, I don't know why I remember this like so potently, but it was January, so we had just started, I guess, like the spring semester, even though that's not what they called it back then, you know, because we weren't in college, we were in high school, but we had gotten back from Christmas break, started up in January. This album came out. At the time, I couldn't like take my phone and plug it into an aux cord. I don't know, the '06 Civic was not designed that way. So what I did is I had CDs. So either I would go to Best Buy and I would buy, you know, an album, one of my favorite artists, I'd buy one of their CDs, or I would have to buy it, like a song or whatever, on iTunes. And then if I really liked it, wanted to play it in my car, I would have to burn those songs on a CD on the computer so then I could play it in my car. So it was like just definitely a struggle. But anyways, I think I burned a lot of songs off of this album that I liked onto a CD. So I was playing it in my car, and then my friend at the time, Jessica McCombs, she was a grade younger than me, so she would have been a freshman. I was a sophomore. She couldn't drive. I technically had my permit, but you're not supposed to drive with people in your car. And it was snowy outside. It was January. It was January in Iowa. There was all of this fucking snow on the ground. We're in my Civic. We're listening to this album, and I'm taking her home. And for some reason, that memory is so crisp. It's beautiful how music can literally take you back to a place in time. So when I listen to this album, even to this day, it takes me back to that snapshot. And so when we're going through this list, I think a lot of things that I tried to take into account was big songs that were on the album. If there was a lot of songs on the album that I listened to, if there's memories attached to the album, if there's like big significance and meaning from this album in my life, that's kind of what I went to in order to put it on this list. So number one, again, Long Live ASAP by A$AP Rocky. And it was really hard as well creating this list, looking at all these artists, because they have multiple albums that are really good. And so that's what I was like really trying to keep in consideration. If I liked a lot of their albums, like what was the one album of theirs that like really stood out to me? But some artists have 2 albums on this list, but for most of them, I was like, if I really liked them, try and narrow it down to 1. Okay, number 2 on this list, Blue Chips 7000 by Action Bronson. So I think this came out in like 2017. I can't remember the exact time of year. I want to say like September of that year. And so that is when I was starting college at Simpson. I had already gotten through 2 years of college by going to DMAC and getting my gen eds out of the way. And now I was transferring to a private college in Simpson College, which is actually also here in my hometown of Indianola, Iowa. And at the time, I was really big into Action Bronson. He had a show, still has this show, but at the time he had the show Fuck, That's Delicious, and it was on Viceland, which my parents had DirecTV, and through their package or whatever, Viceland was one of the channels that was covered in the package. And so I started watching Action Bronson because he had that. He had other channels because it was like Fuck, That's Delicious, and then there was other shit. Like he was just an amazing person to watch. Definitely an entrepreneur, but then he's also a musician and makes really good fucking music, mainly hip hop and rap. But if you ever listen to his music, I feel like it's really influenced by a bunch of different cultures, a bunch of different genres, a bunch of different styles of music. And I think one of his most complete projects, best sounding projects that he ever put out was Blue Chips 7000. The guy is so creative with his lyrics, his storytelling. He's so funny. Just the things that he crafts into a song, it's really hard to describe unless you go listen to it. But again, in my opinion, I think one of his actual best project so far in his discography is Blue Chip 7000. So if you haven't heard that album, you should go check it out. All right, number 3, Limbo by Amine. So this one came out in 2020, and I think it was it wasn't my first exposure to Amine, but it was like the first album of his that I like really took seriously and like really took the time to go ahead and listen to it. I remember it coming out in 2020, probably sometime in the fall. So I was still at Simpson at that point. I was trying to wrap up, and get my degree. And another, like an important detail, something I remember about this album is I came home to my apartment one day, the apartment that I'm still living in right now, where I'm recording from, and I saw that he dropped this album, and so I started listening to it, but I was kind of listening to it like very passively. I think I just was like doing some shit around my apartment. I was just distracted. I was multitasking. But then I had the album on. And the song, actually, I think it's an interlude, or it's like a very short track on the album that's called Kobe, comes on. And he's talking about, obviously, the death of Kobe Bryant. And he's talking about how Kobe impacted him in his life, how he was such a big, like, great role model for Amine. And there's like this part in this little interlude, this short track called Kobe. And he's saying, when Kobe Bryant died, it was like a part of himself had passed away with Kobe. Because he's like, I've been following this athlete ever since I was a kid. He's a huge part of my life, a huge part of my childhood. When he died, it was like this sense of innocence died along with him. And when Amine said that and articulated that in that track, it blew my freaking mind, because I was thinking about Mac Miller, my biggest influence when it came to music. And Mac Miller passed away before Kobe back in 2018, and I had never really thought about it that way. I was like, dude, Amine, that is such a crazy idea to articulate, but you're so fucking right. When Mac died, it was like there was this part of me that also died as well. I felt this shift in me, this maturity start to change, taking things a little bit more seriously, trying to get better in my own life, because that was my biggest influence in music. That was my biggest role model. So that's not the only good song on this album. There's many great tracks, but after I like heard that, and like I said, I was being very passive in that first listening experience, then I was like hooked all of a sudden. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go listen to this album, but I'm going to block out all distractions. And I fell in love with multiple tracks off of that album. So number 3, Limbo by Amine is a great album. Number 4, Avenged Sevenfold. So it's the title album to the band Avenged Sevenfold. It has the white cover, and then it has their logo of the skull. It's black with the wings that are also black. That one's kind of older. That one came out in 2007. And I remember I started listening to it when I was in middle school. But as I got older into high school and then even into my 20s, it's just one of those albums that I've always gone back to. Like, I think it's aged so well. There's so many prominent tracks on that album. And I don't know if I would say it's Avenged Sevenfold's, most complete album, but it's my personal favorite. There's so many good tracks on there. So many nostalgic tracks that just take me back to a certain time and place. So that is number 4. Great freaking album. Number 5, I Decided by Big Sean. I don't think a lot of people that are, involved in the rap and the hip hop community are going to remember this album, because I think a lot of people would argue that other projects by Big Sean should probably take the cake, the ones that are a little bit more popular, a little bit more relevant. This one kind of slid under the radar for Big Sean. I don't think a lot of people would talk about it or put it on their list, but to me, it's it's a great album. It's one of those albums, for the most part, from start to finish, I don't think there's really any tracks that I would like to skip. And, when you can find an album like that where you're like, dude, like, really, is every song a banger? No, not necessarily. But every track fits. Every track is solid. You go from start to finish. You don't want to skip any tracks. And I feel like it's one of those like really consistent and concise projects where every track that's on there has a purpose. There's a reason that it was put on there. And I think, I'm not a musician, I'm not an artist in that sense, but when you are able to do that, like really construct an album that has purpose, that has meaning, that has flow, that's a really hard thing to do. Because I think most artists, when they're creating an album, they make a shit ton of tracks. And you understand that if you made 50 tracks for an album, you have to narrow that down to a select few, 15, 14. I think there's 14 tracks on this particular album. It's kind of like what I'm doing right now, like trying to decide 50 great albums out of all of the albums that have existed. It's really hard to do, but Big Sean, underrated album, another one, it's like if you have not heard it, I think you should go check it out. It's one of my favorite albums of all time, especially by him. Okay, we go to number 6. It's Enema of the State by Blink-182. This was hard. Blink-182 is one of my favorite bands of all time, and I think they have plenty of good albums. So I had to narrow it down and be like, well, what is one of my favorites? And I think it has to be Enema of the State, which came out in 1999. Something that's so crazy about Blink-182, and I've heard other people say this, so I'm not the only one that thinks this way, feels this way. Blink-182 is one of those interesting bands where, they have touched different generations, different decades. So their music was going on as I was being born in 97, and I didn't start listening to them until I was at the tail end of middle school and I was just going into high school. And so I feel like their music is music that is ageless. It's like wine. It ages like wine. It's fine wine. I know older people, older than me. I'm 27, I'll be 28 in March. I know people that are older than me that love Blink-182. I know people in my generation that love Blink-182. And I know younger generations are still listening to this band. So they've been able to accomplish a very rare feat in their music career where they've been able to touch all of these different generations and make all of these different generations love and become attached and, are able to make music that is easily relatable to all these different types of people. So Blink-182 deserves a spot on this list. It just so happens that Enema of the State is the album that I picked, but there's so many other good albums by these guys. So that's why it was, once again, just so hard to narrow. I just think of some of the big songs off of that album. I started listening heavily to Blink-182. It was the summer of 2011. Pretty much the only thing I was doing that summer is I would go to my grandma's house and I would hang out with my cousin Riley, and then we would ride our skateboards over to the skate park. We would start there in the summer, and then once the pool opened, because they were pretty much right next to each other, then we would go to the pool. We'd swim all day. When we got tired of the pool, we'd go back to the skate park. When we wanted to jump back in the pool and things got hot, you go back to the pool. We just go back and forth every freaking day. That was our routine. I met so many people at the pool, met so many friends, had so many girlfriends that summer. It's one of the best times of my life in growing up. And so when I think of Blink-182, that time, they are the soundtrack to a lot of my youth as I was growing up and going through those formative years. So obviously a very meaningful, significant band in my life. Number 7, is Saturation 3 by Brockhampton. You know, Brockhampton is one of those groups that's probably in my top 5, if not that, my top 10 of favorite artists and bands of all time. So it, again, just so hard to pinpoint one album. They have so many good albums, but I looked through their discography and I asked myself the hard question. I said, Cole, if you had to pick, in your opinion, your favorite album of theirs, their best album in your eyes, I said it has to be Saturation 3. These guys went crazy in 2017. If you guys have forgotten, 2017, they dropped, in the same fucking year, they dropped Saturation 1, great project, their first album. Then they went Saturation 2, which is arguably even better than Saturation 1. And there's a lot of growth from Saturation 1 to 2, even though it's in the same year. And then in the same year, they dropped Saturation 3, which is better than 2 and 1. And you're like, what are these guys doing? They're saturating the market. And it worked because it got them on the map. People started to pay attention. I've always been a big music head, but like somehow in 2017, I was not listening to Brockhampton. It wasn't until 2020, but religiously at the start of 2021 is when I like really got into Brockhampton. And so I had to go back to all of these previous projects that had already been out for a long time. And I was kind of mad at myself. I was like, how did I let this slip under my radar? This music is so amazing. I don't need to go into the whole story because I'm not trying to make this video like super long, but like Brockhampton, you guys, if you don't know their story, you should look it up. All these guys that, you know, created this, they formed this, what they called a boy band. So I think at the peak of their existence, they had 13 members or so in the boy band. Not all of them sang, not all of them rapped. I mean, a lot of it was just like, you know, creative direction type of stuff. But when you first start listening to it, there's so many interchangeable voices that you're like, who the fuck is this? And it just made it so exciting, man. They are such a creative, unique bunch. Very much reminds me of Odd Future when they were coming up in 2013. You know, Odd Future, that collective of Tyler the Creator, Earl Sweatshirt, Domo Genesis, Frank Ocean, Mike G. That was kind of, you know, just 4 years after they had exploded. Here comes Brockhampton, and they are very reminiscent of what Odd Future was doing, and maybe even took that whole movement to even better, bigger, newer heights. So number 7 is Saturation 3 by Brockhampton. Number 8, Something for Nothing by Chunk No Captain Chunk. I believe this band is from a different country. Maybe they're from London, England. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But this album, I believe, came out around like 2011. Their genre would be considered like pop punk, probably mainly pop punk. I'm sure there's some other genres in there. They actually kind of remind me a lot of A Day to Remember. But obviously, because they're from a different country, you know, the voice, lyrics, singing, it sounds a little bit different. But they have some heavy hitting songs. And yeah, there's not like a lot of big meaning behind this album, but just going through my playlist, going through my entire like music menu, I'm like, oh yeah, this is one of those albums that, you know, still gets to me. So definitely another one that's probably under the radar, not a lot of people would think about, but to me it's a phenomenal album. And there's like 5 or 6 tracks out of the 11 or 12 that like really stand out to me. And those songs are songs that I don't think I would ever get tired of. So that's number 8. Number 9, Atrocity Exhibition by Danny Brown. Danny Brown is of the rap and hip hop category. Atrocity Exhibition is an insane album. It's literally Danny Brown going through this drug infused trip, downfall, heights, lows, going up the roller coaster. It's insane. He, and on this album, which I recommend everybody does this if they don't already. Usually when I listen to albums, I try and go from starting track to finishing track. I think this is one of those albums where it is super important that you follow that methodology, because it literally is a trip. It's a journey from start to finish. There's so many twists, so many turns, so distorted, so creative, so experimental. I mean, I'm assuming he was on drugs when he made it, and not to say that everybody should get on drugs, but you know, when you're talking about music, typically when an artist or a band is under the influence of some type of drug, typically they create some amazing music, and this is no exception. Atrocity Exhibition by Danny Brown coming in at number 9. Could drink water. Number 10, Homesick by A Day to Remember. I put this album in the video that I was talking about earlier, where it was like top 3 most influential albums of all time in my life. Homesick, again, that time period that I was just talking about back in 2011, that summer. That was the year, that was the summer that I really got into A Day to Remember, and they became my favorite band of all time. Homesick is an album that is so nostalgic, makes me think about that time heavily. And it's another album where you can't skip any tracks. When I listen to it, I want to go from start to finish. It's so methodical, the way that it was designed, track by track. It always keeps your attention for the entire project. It is truly, in my opinion, a fucking masterpiece. Something amazing about A Day to Remember is they kind of like Sleep Token. That's like the big band that comes to mind. I'm sure I could think of other bands or other artists. A Day to Remember is amazing at genre hopping, genre switching, genre bending. They do so many different sounds, but they make it sound like it all goes together, like this seamless transition from genre to genre. I don't know how they do it. They're one of the best bands ever to do it. Homesick is amazing. I don't think I could ever get tired of that album. Number 11, since we're in alphabetical order, we're going to keep it here with A Day to Remember. The album is What Separates Me From You. So Homesick was the album that came out right before What Separates Me From You. So they literally went back to back on these albums. In all honesty, then after What Separates Me From You comes Common Courtesy. And in my opinion, that is one of the most impressive 3 album stretches out of any band, out of any artist, any musician across forever. What Separates Me From You was another album that I was listening to in 2011 that summer, because that's when I discovered A Day to Remember. So I was like, okay, I got to go through their entire discography and I need to get myself ready before they drop the newest album, which inevitably didn't come out until 2013. So I had plenty of time to go back and listen to all of their music. But at the time, I didn't know that. What Separates Me From You is insane, dude. It used to be that like, anytime I went through a breakup or I felt like I was fucked over in life, those were 2 big albums that I went back to. And like whenever I did a workout and I was trying to bring all of those emotions to the surface, I would listen to those 2 particular albums because they just, they made me fucking rage. They made me tap into the primal nature of being a human being. And when you go through a breakup, you've been fucked over, your emotions are all over the place. You need to take all of that energy, that dark side energy, and you need to turn it into productive action, doing something productive and healthy, like going and killing a workout, right? Because you don't want to go out in public, be so frustrated that the first person that looks at you weird, you say, fuck you, dude, and you punch them in the face. This is a healthy way to deal with your emotions or a tough situation like that. And can't say enough great things about A Day to Remember. They're in my top 5 for sure. Favorite artists, bands, musicians of all time. Number 12, Taboo, spelled differently, by Denzel Curry. Denzel Curry is a spitter. This album, I believe, came out in 2018, I want to say. And Denzel Curry has a lot of good albums, a lot of good projects, a lot of good songs, a lot of good music. So I had to narrow it down. But I'm like, you know what? And overall, like over the whole scheme of things, over his entire discography, in my opinion, this is his best, most complete, most articulate album, Taboo. A lot of good songs on there, a lot of good hits. I mean, I feel like this man is just continuing to evolve in his music career. Some of his new stuff is really good too. Another hard one to narrow it down, but that's one of my favorite albums of all time. So many good tracks on there. So then if we go to 13, it was Nothing Was the Same by Drake. I remember this coming out in 2013 in the fall. I was playing football. I was a junior at that point. I was dating my high school sweetheart, Megan. Shout out to you, Megan. I don't know if you'll end up watching this video or not, but again, these things that are just, these memories that are stamped out in my head. I'm still driving the Honda Civic, and I have this album that I bought from Best Buy. I have the CD. It was fall time, because that's typically when Drake puts out music. You know, they call him October's very own. I love the cover of this album, start to finish, so many good tracks. You know, Drake, he gets a lot of hate, especially this year. He lost the rap battle with Kendrick Lamar. I think that's very apparent. A lot of people look at him like he's sus, like he's cringe, don't want to take him seriously. I get all that. I can agree with a lot of those things, but you can't deny this man has given us so many hits, so much great music, so many fantastic, phenomenal albums. Nothing Was the Same is my favorite album by him. I think he's in his bag. I think he's in his feelings. When Drake is in his feelings, makes a song when he's in his feelings about something, I'm not sure there's anybody that can top him. You know, there was the claims at one point by Kanye, by Pusha T, that Drake doesn't write his own raps. He doesn't write his own songs. He's got a ghostwriter. Still don't know if that was ever truly confirmed. I don't know. If it's the person that's writing his music, then we should give them a lot of credit, give them a pay raise. But if it's Drake, it's like some of his writing ability is insane, and I think that often gets overlooked just because he's made so many like notable hits that get played on the radio. But there's a lot of songs of his, and I think this album too goes under the radar. I mean, it's a beautiful album. There's so many great moments that are, you know, laced throughout this album. So I think it's Drake at his best. And there's a lot of other good stuff by him, but that's just the one that like really sticks out to me. Number 14, Doris by Earl Sweatshirt. Earl Sweatshirt is in my top 5 favorite artists of all time. Doris is the first album that he ever put out. A lot of these albums I feel like are coming from 2013, 2011, right in that window in time, because those were my formative years. Doris was his first project, first album that he released. I've said it so many times about Earl, like I don't want it to be repetitive, but the man is so complicated with his lyrical, poetic ability to write that like when you're listening to his music, it takes so much like concentration, effort, and focus from you, and it's gonna take multiple listens. I mean, dude, I think it was either this work week that we just had, or it was the week before. I was listening to a song off of Doris that I've heard 5 million times before, and I get to it's Night. It's spelled Knight, featuring Domo Genesis. There's a part at the end of the song where Earl says, his lyrics read, "Young, black, and jaded, vision hazy, strolling through the night." And I don't know why. I've heard that lyric, I've heard that bar, like I said, so many times, but for some reason, it like hit me. It like all of a sudden clicked in my head. I was like, that is such a simple, but yet profound line, the way that he constructed it. He's describing himself as young, black, and jaded, And then he said, before he finishes the line, he says, his vision is hazy, strolling through the night. So the title is Night, K-N-I-G-H-T, but it has two separate meanings. It's like him as a knight in shining armor, but he's also strolling through like the nighttime when it gets dark out. His vision is hazy. He can't see clearly. It's nighttime. It's dark. Can't see. But he's like trying to get through the night to clear up his mind. So his vision isn't. It's just like there's so many double, triple, quadruple entendre. How would you say it? Yeah. Double entendres, triple entendres, quadruple entendres. It's like, that's the type of music that I love. It could be many listens later, but you're still getting new information, new intel from it. Doris is one of his best projects, and it's so crazy because it's the first project that he ever put out. We go to 15. It's Earl Sweatshirt once again, without a doubt. A newer album in his discography came out in 2018. It is Some Rap Songs by Earl Sweatshirt. It's a very short album. It's like 15, 16 tracks, but the length, like the runtime is not that long, and it's kind of very like depressing, melancholy, distorted project, but kind of like Danny Brown and Atrocity Exhibition. Earl Sweatshirt went to the depths of his soul. A lot of what he's talking about on there is, it was like right around the time that his father had passed away, had to go to his funeral, had to look at him in his casket. And he's just basically saying like, dude, there for a time, like my life was fucking terrible. The days were ass. And even like the project that came out before, Some Rap Songs, it's literally the project in between Doris and Some Rap Songs. So it's his sophomore album called I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside. There's a lot of like depressing shit, a shitstorm of the emotions, and Some Rap Songs only follows that, but even goes further into that experimental route. I mean, it's one of those albums, in my opinion, that should be studied by the human race because it very much describes the human experience that a lot of us have felt when we were depressed, or we were anxious, or we were feeling lost in life, or we were swallowed by the whole nature of our emotions. It's a good album, but it's a hard album to stomach. I won't go back to it super often because it's also not like an album that you would like bop. Like there's all these heavy hitters on there. I had to describe it in such a way, not necessarily the album, but in 2000, so he released it at the end of 2018. April of 2019, me and my best friend Dakota Phillips, we went down to Lawrence, Kansas to a venue called the Granada to see Earl Sweatshirt perform. And I kind of had it in my head. I was like, okay, it's a concert. We're going to have a fun experience. We're going to be jumping around. He's going to be playing his hits. And then like going through the experience, being at the concert, I realized that that was not the case. And it kind of disappointed me for a second, like in the moment. But then when me and Dakota were driving back to Iowa afterwards, we kind of like discussed it. And I had like a revelation. I was like, well, Earl's not necessarily that type of artist. I mean, he's got a few hits. He's got a few bangers, but this guy is so complex, so intricate with his music. There's so many multiple layers. You got to study it like it's the Bible. So it's like never ending the way that you would study it. And I'm like, oh, that's why his concert felt different. You didn't necessarily want to fucking like riot or like get in a mosh pit, like, you know, bounce your head around. It was very chill, very laid back, very relaxed, but he's a nonchalant bar spitter with a few bigger hits and bangers sprinkled in between. So that was like a realization that I had when we went to his concert. Number 16, Popular Monster by Falling in Reverse. This came out actually this year, but there's so many hits on the album. I've talked a lot about Falling in Reverse, Ronnie Radke on this channel, so I'm not going to go into it too deep. I just think he's an amazing musician. I think everything here recently that he's put out has been gold, has been platinum, and I think Falling in Reverse, Ronnie Radke are only starting to tap into greatness, right? So like it's gonna be amazing to see what they do from here on out. I mean, that man has completely changed his life around, and his band is at the biggest that it's ever been in their entire career. And I love the man. He's a fucking savage. So 16, Popular Monster, Falling in Reverse. Number 17, Capri Songs by FKA Twigs. That's an underrated project. Came out in 2022. I think it's actually technically considered a mixtape, but I'm just going to put it on the list and consider it an album. I really don't know anything else about FKA Twigs. I hadn't really listened to her before I came across this project, but she was able to create quite a unique sound in this album, a sound that I have never heard before in any album. I think if you go on Apple Music, it is considered as a like electronic, like that's like the genre that they would put it in, but it's, I don't know if I would go as far to say that it's a masterpiece, but it's a great project. Number 18, Vacation in Hell by Flatbush Zombies. One of my favorite rap groups that are out there from the East Coast. It's comprised of Eric the Architect, Zombie Juice, and my personal favorite of the three is Michi Darko. A great rap hip hop project, came out in 2018. I think it was their third album as a group, and it's actually the last album, technically the last album that they've put out. So we're at the end of 2024. This came out in the earlier half of 2018, so it's been 6.5 years, almost 7 years since we've gotten a project from Flatbush. Mainly because after they put out this album, Eric the Architect has done some solo stuff, some other collabs, projects with other artists. I don't think Zombie Juice has put out any solo projects. I could be wrong on that. And then Michi Darko put out his first solo album. I think it was in 2022. But if you are a big rap and hip hop fan and you have not heard this album, you are fucking missing out on greatness. And even the album that they put out before this one is also really good too, but I just felt like it wasn't my favorite of them in their catalog, in their discography. So ultimately I went with Vacation in Hell. Number 19, Blonde by Frank Ocean. I could not leave Frank Ocean off of this list. This album came out in 2016. It was like fall. I was just starting my second year of DMAC. And I was listening to this project. And I was talking to this beautiful girl at the time. Ultimately, obviously, it didn't work out. I'm not with her now. But I remember she came over to my parents' house a few times, and like we would watch movies. I think we only technically hung out like 2 or 3 times, and then I didn't hear from her. She ghosted me. But again, just telling memories and stories. I just remember around that time I was listening to Blonde by Frank Ocean, and I was like, my goodness, this is a beautiful album. But even then, I didn't listen to it with full intent. It was actually years later. It was like 2020, 2019, I revisited this album and found an even deeper appreciation for it and more love for more songs, like I said, that I didn't really pay attention to on that first listen back in 2016. The last album that Frank Ocean has put out. So just like Flatbush Zombies, it's like, when are we going to get another project from Flatbush? When are we going to get another project from Frank Ocean? Number 20! Alfredo by Freddie Gibbs and The Alchemist. Such a great collab between the two. Very short project. But Freddie Gibbs is spitting on this project. Alchemist is doing his thing with beautiful instrumentals that take you from where you're sitting and transport you to a different universe, a different dimension. Maybe one of the greatest collabs between a rapper an artist and a producer of all time. Highly recommend. Again, if you have not heard this project, you need to go check it out desperately. Number 21, Forest Hills Drive, and I didn't put by what artist. It is 2014 Forest Hills Drive by J. Motherfucking Cole. Obviously came out in 2014. I was wrapping up my senior year at high school. And I remember going through this project. I'm like, yo, this shit is so good. I can't believe that he's got no features on this album. He smacked it out of the park. A big thing in rap and hip hop in that community and that sector of music, that genre, is built on an artist's ability to collab with other artists in the game. I have always thought of rap and hip hop that way, grown up listening to it. And so it was kind of weird. It was kind of unique. It was kind of different to see J. Cole come out with this banger of a project and he had no features on there. He did it all by himself. He's one of the GOATs. And mainly one of the reasons is, I think, this album right here. He was telling people, hey, I can do this by myself. I don't got to do it with help. And then later on after that, in more recent years, he's kind of gone back to collaborating with other artists. Said, you know what, it's definitely time to do that once again. He's like, I had to be selfish for a little bit, but now I want to collab with the new up and coming guys, some of the other GOATs. And so it's great to see his evolution, his transition over the years, and realized, oh, I don't got to do it all by myself. But that was definitely a fun period in time, because you were it was like him, Kendrick, and Drake, were the top ones. I guess Kanye up there. Maybe Jay-Z, maybe Lil Wayne. I don't know. Everything is subjective when it comes to music. Number 22, it is called Iris. I forget how he actually pronounces it. I think it's Iris by Jaden Smith. Very good project. Jaden Smith is one of those characters that gets a lot of slack because they're like, oh, you started doing music, but are you just coattailing off of your father, your mother, who were both in Hollywood, actors, musicians in their own right, and now we're seeing Willow, his sister, who has also started a music career. I will say, though, this is a really good project by Jaden Smith. There is 4 tracks in the beginning of the album that are essentially the intro. The first track is called P. The second track is called I. The third track is called N. The fourth track is called K, so it spells out pink. I forget the runtime between all of those 4 songs, but it's literally geniusness by Jaden Smith, is that all of these 4 tracks spelling out pink literally flow into each other. It is one of the best ways to open up an album that I have ever witnessed from an artist. So I'm going to say this with a lot of these albums. If you've not checked out that album, I think it's a little bit underrated, not on a lot of people's radar. I would say go check that shit out. Also, a lot of good features on that album. Number 23, it is Yay. Oh, fuck. It is Yay by Kanye West. It is the one that is 7 tracks, so it's very short. And the cover track is in the mountains, and then it has this green scribbled writing that says, I hate being bipolar, it's awesome. So Kanye West addressing himself as bipolar, being diagnosed with that. Obviously, Kanye West has been a very controversial figure to a lot of people. I know he said a lot of outlandish shit, but I actually love the man. I actually think he's very well respected. You cannot deny his musical genius, his musical prowess, but he's also, stranded off and done other avenues like fitness and I'm not saying fitness, I'm saying fashion. That's what I want to say. They both start with F. The guy's incredible. And I think he gets a lot of all those controversial people that we talk about, like Donald Trump, Kanye West, Ronnie Radke. They're either loved or they're either hated. It's like that hard line to walk on. I think those types of people most of the time are very misunderstood by the people that hate them. Yeah, he might say some outlandish shit, but he's just a passionate human being, and I can relate to that because I'm the same way. And people say he's saying things that are out of line. Well, he's, one of the few motherfuckers on that scale that has the balls, that has the cojones to say those things. He says things that other people wish they probably could say, but they're way too afraid to say it. And then because it's deemed as like not acceptable, in society, it's not, it's not the right message or whatever, then it gets, attacked by cancel culture and all these people go after him. But it's like, I think the man has bravery. I think he has courage. I think he says whatever the fuck he wants. And I love that energy. And that, if I had to make like a top 50 favorite albums of all time, obviously Yay by Kanye West would be on there. And it would probably be in the top 10. That's how much I hold this album in high regard. Number 24, I had to put it in there. It's Teenage Dream by Katy Perry. Don't y'all motherfucking haters come at me in the comments. This is a great album. There's so many hits off of this album. I'm not a fan of Katy Perry for her politics because I think she's a screaming liberal and she tries to influence her fan base to vote the same way that she does, just like Taylor Swift does. But I cannot deny that she has made some great fucking music over the years. And this album is phenomenal. I could bump it in my car on a sunny day in the summertime while I'm getting roadhead from my chick. I mean, it's amazing. Katy Perry is a great artist. I will acknowledge that. No hate on that front. Number 25, it is Damn by Kendrick Lamar. Oh my God. People are going to hate on me because like, you're not mentioning, what are his other two really good projects? That a lot of people hold in high regard. It's like To Pimp a Butterfly and then Good Kid, Mad City. I was not a massive fan of To Pimp a Butterfly. I don't know. I just didn't get a whole lot from it. I did like Good Kid, Mad City. But to me, Damn from 2017 stands out. Kendrick always going hard. Always proving to us time and time again why he is one of the greatest of all times. It's another album. Every track flows into the next one. I have to listen to every track when I come back to this album. And I was young enough at the time, 2017, I think I was like 20. It was one of the projects that just lit up the entire year. I can't say enough good things about that album. Number 26, Man on the Moon, The End of Day by Kid Cudi. So it's the first installation of Man on the Moon, the trilogy series. And there are so many hits on this album. I was listening to it. It probably came out before I really started to listen to it, but it was that summer of 2007 or 2011. That's when I really started to listen to Kid Cudi, and this was one of those projects that I was putting on repeat in my freaking iPod that I had at the time, because people didn't really have iPhones, they had iPods. That's how you listen to your music. Although it was essentially like the first version of an iPhone, because I had one that was looked like a phone, had a touch screen and whatnot. And this was one of those albums that I was listening to. Kid Cudi has this amazing ability of just being so hypnotic to the soul through his music. He can rap, he can do a lot of different things. He's also very much known for his hums and his melodies. Those are definitely the sounds that he makes, and his music, just captivates you. It is so hypnotic. Number 27 is The Carter 4 by Lil Wayne. I mean, we had to get Lil Wayne on this list. And to me, out of all of his albums and then all of the Carter albums, I think number 4 is probably my personal favorite. Number 3 is pretty good. It took a while to get number 5 out. That came out much later than when it was anticipated, when it was supposed to originally drop. Number 28, here we go. The guy, the GOAT. I chose Faces by Mac Miller. Once again, it's technically a mixtape, but it's like 25, 26, 27 tracks. So it could be considered an album, and out of Mac's, fan base, a lot of people say this is one of his best projects. It's so haunting, it's so revealing, it's so vulnerable. I have the tapestry in the background. This is the Faces cover art. Yeah, dude, that album, mixtape, whatever you want to call it, is a whole ass experience. So definitely knew that was going to make the list at some point. Number 29 is Swimming by Mac Miller, a more recent project. It was the last album that he put out before he passed away. To be specific, it was like a month before he passed away. Every time Mac Miller put out a project and I listened to it, it taught me something about my own life. It revealed something to me about my own life. I don't know why I was so attached to this man, why I resonated so much with him, why he just kept popping up on my radar, but he did, and I know he did for a lot of people, so I could probably articulate that a little bit better, but again, I'm kind of like trying to speed through this a little bit. Don't want to take up too much time. It's a great album. It's so weird to listen to now that he's passed away. Number 30, oh God, I'm having the backspace on a lot of these and some things I left out. Tickets to My Downfall by MGK. It's the album where he got out of his previous genres, rap and hip hop, and he said, fuck it, I'm gonna make like an alternative rock pop punk album. Definitely sounds a lot like Blink-182, and that may be because MGK was influenced heavily by Blink-182, and Travis Barker is doing the drums, playing the drums on this album, and I think helped out with a lot of the production on this album. A lot of people gave MGK flack for this, for taking this risk and going in this different direction, but I thought it sounded great, and I really applaud the man. I like his rap and hip-hop stuff for sure. That's what I was raised on. Not raised on by my parents, but that's what I listened to growing up. But Tickets to My Downfall, and then the album that came after this, Mainstream Sellout, sitting in that genre, are both good. I think this is probably, though, my favorite MGK album of all time. Had to fit it in the top 50. Number 31 is Culture by Migos, a trap banger, if you will. Trapaholics. The Migos, you got Quavo, you got Offset, and then Takeoff, rest in peace. He died back in 2022. This is my favorite album of theirs, came out in 2017. It was at the height of Migos. I went to see them in concert that summer, that year at Seven Flags Events Center in Clive in Iowa, and they put on a really good show, even though they were late by like 30 minutes or something like that. They still played a really good set. There's a lot of hits off of that album. Fucking love the Migos, man. Number 32, Dr. Feelgood by Motley Crue. Motley Crue was my first concert when I was 8 years old. I was in second grade. My parents pretty much raised me on 80s hairball, rock and roll, alternative rock, a little bit of country, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Metallica, Guns N' Roses, all those bands. Motley Crue, out of all of them, was my favorite band. That was like the first band that I wanted to be like. And Dr. Feelgood is, I think, their best, most complete album. Has a lot of good fucking hits on there. Their other albums are good, but this is the one that stands out to me. Number 33, The Black Parade by My Chemical Romance. Great album. Stretching for things to say right now. Yeah, My Chemical Romance, probably in my top 10 favorite artists of all time. I think all of us, that sit inside the age range, 27, 28 years old, we may all have had like an emo phase listening to bands like My Chemical Romance, and The Black Parade is phenomenal. Can't skip any track on that album. Number 34 is Sour by Olivia Rodrigo. Again, you can come attack me for the people that are like, oh my God, what's up, Flamer? What's up, faggot? You're going to put Katy Perry on this list? You're going to put on Olivia Rodrigo? Yes, this was one of the best freshman debut albums I have ever heard. Her second album wasn't as good, but Sour by Olivia Rodrigo, I know a lot of the songs got played on the radio, so they got overplayed. as all radio songs tend to become. But this is a great album about a breakup, essentially about her first breakup when she's in high school. We all went through that moment, man. It was potent. It hurt like shit. I remember when Megan and I broke up. Now, it was after college, it was after high school. We were in our first years of college, but it fucking stung, dude, because that's the girl that I lost my virginity to. I loved her. It was puppy dog love. I thought it was real love. I thought we were going to get married someday and have kids. That's what we talked about. Most people go through a phase like this where you lose your high school sweetheart, your first love. And Olivia Rodrigo is just like articulating that idea to fucking perfection. It's a great album. You can't hate me. Number 35, Collide with the Sky by Pierce the Veil. Another album that just goes so fucking hard in the gym. There was a period in time earlier this year where this was the only album that I listened to when I was in the gym and I was pushing heavy weights. It came back to me, even though this album came out in 2013 or something like that, 2012, something like that. It's a phenomenal album. So many heavy hitting songs. So many melodies too. I love their lead singer Vic Fuentes, I think is his name. And crazy, like they're still making music, still doing the same thing that Day to Remember is doing. So longevity is definitely a thing for those guys. 36 is By the Way by Red Hot Chili Peppers. Red Hot Chili Peppers are definitely in my top 10 favorite artists, bands, musicians of all time. It's one of the only things my dad was playing when I was growing up. I finally got to see them in concert in Vegas in early 2023 with my family. It was my dad, my mom, and my brother. And it was one of the funnest experiences I've had at a concert, at a live show, because I grew up on these guys as a kid. They were part of my childhood. They were in the household. They were on repeat all the time. But I had never seen them perform live. So that was like a full circle moment for me. And it was cool because they had John Frusciante back in the group, who pretty much played lead guitarist like when I was listening to them as a kid, but then he left for a little bit and then they had a different guitarist. But he's always kind of been the X factor, in my opinion, to Red Hot Chili Peppers and has really made them what they are, as far as like lead guitarists are concerned. And so it was so amazing to see these guys in concert, and they still fucking rock for their age. But By the Way, it's a tough one because they have a lot of good albums, but By the Way, I think just in completion is probably one of their better albums in my opinion. And again, a lot of under the radar tracks that you will find on that album. Number 37 is Oxymoron by Schoolboy Q, a guy from California. Good old Q. He was really good friends with Mac Miller. Another one that has a lot of good projects. I picked Oxymoron because I think it came out in 2014 or 2013, one of those years. Again, those were my formative years, so there's a lot of like sentimental meaning attached with this album. Another CD that I got, and I played it in that Honda Civic, and I probably wore that shit out, but it was well worth it because it was a great album and still is a good album. 38, Finding Beauty in Negative Spaces by Seether. Ooh, this is an old one. I started listening to these guys probably in like 6th grade because there is a song off of this album that was the theme song for a WWE pay-per-view. Anybody that knows me super well knows that my childhood was littered with watching WWE. My favorite wrestler was Jeff Hardy. I fell in love with the song that was the theme song for one of their pay-per-views called Fake It, which led me to like dive into this album. And when I was going through for this list and I saw Seether and I saw this album, I'm like, without a fucking doubt, dude, so many great songs on that album. Underrated. Go check it out. 39, as we go to the next page in this Word document. Number 39, We Are Not Your Kind by Slipknot. Yes, Slipknot is from Iowa, so obviously I had to throw them on this list. This album, oh man, this album is an album that got me through arguably the worst breakup in my entire life. I would listen to this album, I would go to the gym, and I would envision myself essentially fucking murdering people. And I know that sounds crazy, but as I talked about earlier, you have to find healthy ways to channel the aggression, the anger, the resentment, the bitterness. Otherwise, it's going to eat you alive. So the best thing that you can do in that instance is bring up an album, an artist that makes you feel that way, and then you take it out on the weights. It's simple as that. This would probably be, again, if we reconstructed this list and said top 50, that's probably in the top 10. That is a phenomenal album. 40, sorry guys, I'm shortcutting a lot of things. Toxicity by System of a Down. You can't argue it. It's a classic, dude. System of a Down. So many bangers on there. So many hard-hitting songs. Another album that's good for the gym. I just like shit that amps you up, dude. Number 41 is Birds in the Trap. Sing McKnight by Travis Scott. Travis Scott is one of those artists, kind of like The Alchemist, that anytime you listen to his music, he really sets the pace and creates this whole different atmosphere and universe for you to live in his world. And I really started to appreciate that musical genius, madness with Birds in the Trap, Sing McKnight. There's not a sleeper track on that album. We go to 42, and I have more Travis Scott. He dropped Astro World in 2018. It was actually on the same day that Swimming came out. And then there was a third album that dropped. I think it was Wiz Khalifa, Rolling Papers 2, if I'm not mistaken. But Astro World, dude, oh my God. It literally sounds like you step, just what I was saying with the previous album, like you're stepping into Travis's world, the Astro World. He created this fucking world and then took the world and put it into music. It's just so symbiotic the way that it plays off of each other. That's probably a top 10 album, if I'm being flat out honest. Number 43 is Hotel California by Tyga. Once again, another one I think that came out in like 2013, and a lot of people don't like Tyga, give him a lot of crap. That's his best project in my opinion. Again, in those formative years, he kind of stole the title for the album by the Eagles, because they have an infamous album called Hotel California. But it's a great album filled with a bunch of top-notch rap and hip-hop cuts. And that's when I feel like he was kind of at the height of his career. I mean, he's still around, he's still making music, but that's when the hype of his name was like going off the charts, you know, because he was a part of Drake, Lil Wayne, Nicki Minaj, and Young Money. It was crazy how Lil Wayne found all three of those artists in Nicki Minaj, Drake, and Tyga, and really helped all of their careers excel and go to these astronomical heights. 44 is Flower Boy by Tyler, the Creator. Such a vulnerable project. It's where we learn Tyler, the Creator, opens up and basically tells us that he is bisexual. He's always kind of been that way. It comes out on the track on that album called Garden Shed, which is just so emotional and so revealing, and the instrumental tucked in with his lyrics just sends you to another planet. Again, talking about lists, if I said top 100 songs of all time, that one, Garden Shed off of that album, is probably in the top 25. That's how amazing it is. Number 45 on this list is Call Me If You Get Lost, also by Tyler, the Creator. A newer project that came out in 2021, and definitely a different tone than Flower Boy. Call Me If You Get Lost is kind of like a really big flex in my opinion. Tyler just talking about all the great things, all the great luxuries that he's been able to cultivate in his life. And just a different sound, just a different tone, but really good. I don't find, once again, really any sleeper tracks on that album. Love going back to that album and listening to it. Number 46 is The Autobiography by Vic Mensa. Another one that really cuts deep. a lot of bleeding through his lyrics, a lot of sensitivity, just opening up in a lot of different ways. Vic Mensa, one of those rappers, hip hop artist that I think goes under the radar. He had a lot of hype behind him when he was first coming out, and then it kind of fell off a little bit, but he is, especially on this project, insane in his writing, lyrical ability, but a lot of the instrumentals are top notch as well. 47 on the list is Big Fish Theory by Vince Staples. In my opinion, he's always been really consistent across all of his projects. That one came out in 2017. I think it's one of his best works. There's really no holes on that project. So shout out to Vince Staples, because he's just Mr. Consistent across his career. Number 48 is Flockavelli by Waka Flocka Flame, another trap artist. That's where I got my appreciation for like trap rap, if you will. Yeah, a lot of good hits on that album. Waka Flocka paved the way for a lot of people. He doesn't get enough respect in rap and hip hop, but you know, he's a pioneer for his time and for the music that came after him. You know, he was the big party anthem type of dude, and then there was a bunch of artists after that that tried to copy it. So y'all better pay your dues and respects to Waka Flocka Flame. Oh my God, guys, we're almost at the end. Number 49 is Rolling Papers, the first one by Wiz Khalifa. I think it came out in 2011 or something like that. So many good cuts from the album. Wiz Khalifa really just taking off with his career right here. It's like kind of the beginning where everybody's starting to really notice his name, and it's just a really good album. It's really solid. A lot of songs that you can go back to and just remind me of middle school, just starting high school, first times I was getting a boner, you know. It's, you know, all those just those pivotal memories. Number 50, the last one on the list. It's based on a true story by 2 Chainz, another kind of like trap rapper. A lot of good collabs on this project, a lot of good features. My first introduction to 2 Chainz, and I was not disappointed. Guys, I'm really just trying to finish this up for you. We're gonna like breeze through the honorable mentions. Guys, that's the video. I really don't want to make it any longer than I have to. Give me your thoughts and opinions. You know, who would you throw in there in your top 50? Love having these musical discussions, man. I'll try and trim this video down as much as I can. I knew it was going to be a little bit longer, just freestyling a top 50 list. You can't just like breeze through things. You have to explain yourself. 4 things that I ask that you guys do if you're new to the channel or if you're already here. These 4 things really just help the channel grow and get bigger. You don't have to do all 4. I just ask that you do one of the 4. Number 1 would be like the video. Number 2, subscribe to the channel. Number 3, comment in the comment section below. And then 4 would be share the video, share the message. Do one of those 4 things if I provided value, if it wasn't a waste of your time, if you enjoyed this experience, if you think I put out good content, I have good takes, have a good thought process for these types of things, for these subjects. I would love for you guys to just help grow the channel, because we're going into year number 5 of doing this, and every year it grows more and more and more, and this is my dream, and you guys know that. So anyways, guys, it's been crazy. It's been a lot. I love you. I will see you on the next video next week. Take care. Bye-bye.